The American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783, was the armed conflict phase of the broader American Revolution, 1765 to 1783. An epic political and military struggle where 13 of Great Britain's North American colonies rejected British imperial rule and formed the United States of America. Here is a summary of the full story. 1. The Prelude to War, 1765 to 1775. The conflict was rooted in a decade of growing political and economic estrangement between the colonies and Great Britain, primarily over taxation without representation. Financial burden. After winning the expensive French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763, Britain sought to raise revenue and assert greater control over its colonies. New taxes and acts. Parliament imposed a series of unpopular acts, arguing it had the right to legislate for the colonies in all cases whatsoever. Stamp Act, 1765, taxed all legal documents and printed materials. Widespread colonial protests led to its repeal. Townshend Acts, 1767, placed duties on essential goods like tea, glass, and paper. Protest and violence. Boston Massacre, 1770. British soldiers fired into a crowd of protesters, killing several colonists. Boston Tea Party, 1773. Colonists, protesting the Tea Act, dumped chests of tea into Boston Harbor. Punishment and unity. In response, Parliament passed the punitive Intolerable Acts, 1774, which shut down Boston Harbor and limited Massachusetts' self-governance. This outraged colonists and led to the formation of the First Continental Congress to coordinate a unified resistance. 2. The start of armed conflict, 1775 to 1776. The military conflict officially began in Massachusetts. The shot heard round the world. On April 19, 1775, British troops marching to seize colonial arms stores clashed with colonial militias, Minutemen, at the battles of Lexington and Concord. Continental Army. The Second Continental Congress established the Continental Army and unanimously appointed George Washington as its commander-in-chief in June 1775. Declaration of Independence. After over a year of fighting, the colonies formally declared their separation from Britain by adopting the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776, proclaiming that all men are created equal and have unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. 3. Key battles and internationalization, 1776 to 1781. The war was marked by early American defeats followed by critical victories that secured foreign support. Early defeats. Washington suffered major losses in New York, notably the Battle of Long Island, 1776, but managed to execute brilliant strategic retreats. Crucial victories. Washington revived American morale with surprise attacks on Hessian mercenaries and British forces at the battles of Trenton and Princeton, 1776 to 1777. Turning point. The American victory at the Battle of Saratoga, 1777, convinced France to formally recognize American independence and enter the war as an ally. France's naval power and financial aid were crucial. Winter at Valley Forge. Washington's army endured a harsh winter at Valley Forge, 1777 to 1778. Where they reorganized and trained, emerging as a more disciplined fighting force. Southern Campaign. The war shifted south, becoming a brutal mix of conventional battles and guerrilla warfare between the Patriot and Loyalist militias. Key American victories included the Battle of Cowpens, 1781. 4. The final victory and peace, 1781 to 1783. The war effectively ended with a decisive joint Franco-American operation. Siege of Yorktown, 1781. General Washington, with the support of a French army and the French fleet, trapped the main British army commanded by General Cornwallis at Yorktown, Virginia. Cornwallis was forced to surrender, leading the British Parliament to vote to end offensive operations. Treaty of Paris, 1783. 2 years later, the war officially concluded with the signing of the treaty. Outcome: Great Britain formally acknowledged the independence of the United States of America. Borders: the new nation gained control of all territory east of the Mississippi River, between Canada and Florida. The American Revolutionary War resulted in the birth of a new nation founded on the principles of republicanism and self-governance.
Social and cultural effects. Egalitarianism and meritocracy. The Revolution's rhetoric of equality, as articulated in the Declaration of Independence, encouraged a shift away from a deferential, aristocratic society toward a more egalitarian, meritocratic one, especially among white men. Separation of church and state. Several states moved to disestablish their official state religions, advancing the principle of religious freedom and separating church authority from government authority. Slavery's complex legacy. The Revolution's ideals fueled the early abolition movement. Northern states passed gradual emancipation laws, and the number of free black people increased. However, the Constitution protected the institution of slavery, and it became even more deeply entrenched in the Southern economy, creating a fundamental contradiction in the nation's founding principles. Impact on women. The concept of Republican motherhood emerged, emphasizing the role of women in educating future patriotic citizens, which led to increased opportunities for women's education. Devastation for Native Americans. By opening up Western expansion, the U.S. government became hostile to the territorial claims of Native American nations, leading to decades of land encroachment, conflict, and displacement. Loyalist exodus. Thousands of colonists loyal to the British Crown, Loyalists, fled the U.S., primarily settling in Canada and other parts of the British Empire. Glow showing Europe-Africa global effects. Inspiration for world revolutions. The American success provided a powerful, tangible example of a people successfully overthrowing a monarchy to establish a republic based on Enlightenment principles. It was a direct influence on the French Revolution, 1789, and, through the spread of revolutionary ideas, helped spark movements for independence in Latin America and the Haitian Revolution. Shift in global power. The defeat of Great Britain and the rise of the U.S. marked a shift in global politics and military power, setting the stage for a new international order. Let's what story of George Washington's role in the American Revolutionary War was the most critical of any single individual. He served as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army for the entire 8 years of the conflict, from 1775 to 1783. His leadership was essential for the survival of the Patriot cause, even though he lost more battles than he won. Military Medal. The military leader. Washington was unanimously appointed by the Second Continental Congress in June 1775. His role involved several key responsibilities. Commander-in-Chief. He was the supreme commander of all colonial military forces. His appointment, a Virginian, also helped unite the northern and southern colonies behind a common cause. Building an army. His first and most enduring task was transforming a collection of poorly equipped, undisciplined colonial militias into a functioning, professional Continental Army. He constantly struggled with recruitment, supply shortages, and low morale. Symbol of the Revolution. Washington's personal fortitude, integrity, and dignity were critical. His refusal to quit, even after major defeats, like in New York, kept the army together and, by extension, kept the revolution alive. Key victories. He planned and led crucial military operations that bolstered morale and secured international support. Siege of Boston, 1776 successfully forced the British to evacuate the city. Battles of Trenton and Princeton, 1776 to 1777 surprise attacks that revived the Patriot cause after a series of devastating losses. Siege of Yorktown, 1781 coordinated a decisive joint Franco-American strategy to trap and force the surrender of the main British Army under General Cornwallis, effectively ending the war. The military strategist. Washington understood that the American army did not need to win every battle to win the war. It simply had to survive and avoid a decisive loss that would crush the rebellion. Fabian strategy. Attrition. He often employed a cautious strategy of wearing down the British forces through harassment and avoiding large, direct confrontations unless the conditions were overwhelmingly favorable. Strategic retreats. His ability to execute strategic retreats, such as the famous nighttime evacuation after the Battle of Long Island, saved the Continental Army from total destruction and allowed him to fight another day. Political military coordination. He skillfully managed his relationship with the civilian Continental Congress, constantly lobbying for resources and authority while ensuring military power remained subordinate to civil authority, a crucial Republican principle. Negotiating with allies. He worked closely with French commanders, like the Marquis de Lafayette and General Rochambeau, to coordinate the joint land and naval effort that resulted in the final victory at Yorktown. His greatest act of leadership came at the end of the war, when he famously resigned his commission to Congress in December 1783, refusing to seize power and firmly establishing the principle of civilian control over the military.
The Royal Navy of Great Britain played a critical and complex role in the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783. At the outbreak of the war, it was the largest and most experienced navy in the world, giving Britain a significant advantage, particularly in the early years. Here is an overview of its involvement. Key roles of the Royal Navy. Projection of power and mobility. The Navy was essential for transporting, supplying, and providing strategic mobility for the British Army, allowing them to strike anywhere along the coastline. Major amphibious operations, like the capture of New York in 1776, relied heavily on naval support. Support for Army operations. Royal Navy warships provided artillery cover for landings and ground forces and often cooperated with the Army on inland waters, like at the Battle of Valcour Island in 1776. Blockade and commerce raiding. The Navy attempted to blockade the American coast to disrupt commerce and prevent the flow of vital supplies, like arms and ammunition, to the Continental Army. However, this blockade was difficult to maintain over the vast coastline. Global conflict. After France, Spain, and later the Dutch Republic entered the war, starting in 1778, the conflict became a global struggle. The Royal Navy was stretched thin, having to defend the home islands, Caribbean possessions, a major economic priority, and trade routes around the world, reducing the forces available in North America. Anchor the decisive naval action. The most significant naval action in North America was the Battle of the Chesapeake, or Battle of the Capes, on September 5, 1781. A French fleet, commanded by Admiral de Grasse, engaged a British fleet led by Admiral Thomas Graves. The French victory prevented the British Navy from reinforcing or evacuating General Cornwallis's army at Yorktown, Virginia. This temporary French naval superiority effectively trapped Cornwallis, leading directly to his surrender and marking the decisive military. Challenges and impact. American privateering. While the nascent Continental Navy was small, American privateers, privately owned ships commissioned to attack enemy commerce, had a substantial impact. They captured thousands of British merchant ships, raising insurance rates and contributing to a turn in British public opinion against the war. The global war, the need to fight major naval powers like France and Spain elsewhere, in the West Indies, the Mediterranean, and the Indian Ocean, ultimately diverted crucial British naval strength away from the American theater. In summary, despite its initial global supremacy, the British Navy's inability to maintain uninterrupted control of the American coastline against the combined American and French naval threat, most critically at the Chesapeake, proved a major factor in Britain's loss of the 13 colonies. The story of the American Revolutionary War ended with a military victory for the American and French forces, followed by a formal peace treaty. However, the long-term consequences reshaped not just North America, but also the course of Western political thought and global history. Dubbed the ending, Treaty of Paris, 1783. The American Revolutionary War was effectively concluded by the Siege of Yorktown in October 1781, where the French-American victory forced the surrender of British General Cornwallis. Although fighting continued for 2 more years in other theaters, the political will in Britain to continue the costly North American campaign was broken. The war formally ended with the signing of the Treaty of Paris on September 3, 1783. Key provisions included recognition of independence. Great Britain formally acknowledged the United States of America as a free, sovereign, and independent nation. Territorial expansion. The U.S. was granted vast, generous borders, extending from the Atlantic coast west to the Mississippi River, north to the Great Lakes, and south to Spanish Florida. This effectively doubled the size of the new nation. Other provisions. The treaty addressed fishing rights, the payment of debts, and Congress's recommendation to the states to restore confiscated property to Loyalists, a provision that was largely ignored. United States long-term consequences. A new nation and global impact. The Revolution's ending story is less about the signing of a document and more about the powerful, lasting political, social, and economic forces it unleashed. 1. Political transformation. Birth of a republic. The U.S. established the world's first permanent federal republic founded on the principles of popular sovereignty, power derived from the people, and a written constitution. The Constitution, the initial government under the Articles of Confederation, proved weak. The long-term resolution was the 1787 Constitutional Convention, which created a stronger, more stable federal system with a division of powers, enshrining fundamental rights in the Bill of Rights. Political participation. The ideals of the Revolution led to increased political participation. State constitutions broadened voting rights, though still largely limited to white men, giving more common citizens a role in governance. 2. Social and cultural shifts. Egalitarianism. Among white men, the rigid social hierarchies of colonial society began to break down. The idea of the gentleman and hereditary privilege was challenged by an emphasis on meritocracy and individual achievement. Separation of church and state. The Revolution accelerated the institutionalization of religious toleration. Many states began to disestablish the official, community-oriented churches, reinforcing the idea of religious freedom. Republican motherhood. The expectation arose that women had a vital role in raising informed, virtuous citizens for the new republic, leading to an increased emphasis on female education. 3. The enduring tension of slavery. A failed reconciliation. The long-term failure of the Revolution was its inability to fully reconcile its stated principles of all men are created equal with the institution of slavery. Weakening in the North. Inspired by revolutionary rhetoric, most northern states enacted gradual emancipation laws. Other provisions. The treaty addressed fishing rights, the payment of debts, and Congress's recommendation to the states to restore confiscated property to Loyalists, a provision that was largely ignored. United States long-term consequences. A new nation and global impact. The Revolution's ending story is less about the signing of a document and more about the powerful, lasting political, social, and economic forces it unleashed. 1. Political transformation. Birth of a republic. The U.S. established the world's first permanent federal republic founded on the principles of popular sovereignty, power derived from the people, and a written constitution. The Constitution, the initial government under the Articles of Confederation, proved weak. The long-term resolution was the 1787 Constitutional Convention, which created a stronger, more stable federal system with a division of powers, enshrining fundamental rights in the Bill of Rights.